Like a fat guy putting on shots, you split your sides at Thursday Thoughts. Welcome to this week's edition of Thursday Thoughts with Eddie Anchor. I'm your host, Eddie Anchor. It is going to be another huge week in the Thunderdome this week as the top four is slowly starting to take shape. With huge wins for Ben and the commish, it has almost all but sealed up the spoon for young coach Robbo. With a lineup that is struggling to make an impact this season, it is very unlikely that he will be able to win the one minimum game required to jump out a bottom spot. While it's been a tough year for him, the one thing we need to remember about the all-round good bloke of the comp is that he is the only one to have copped two bad draft picks in a row. The best thing about the current situation for him? He doesn't have to wrestle with the decision of whether to tank or not, because even going at 100% every game this year, he's no chance of actually winning one. Now, enough about Robbo, let's move on to something important. This week's matchups. And there's nothing more important than the first matchup of this week, Bunga versus the commish. These two teams' position on the ladder belies the importance of the 4 points for both of these coaches. The history between these two goes all the way back to the pre-season, where the infamous Charlie Dixon for Brent Stanton trade took place. This has been a keen topic of discussion, mainly by the commish, as he's been happy to bandy around the fact that he's managed to get the successful side of that trade. The fall of Bunga's performances is in direct correlation to those of Brent Stanton's over the season, as you can see by the graph here. He appears to be some sort of barometer for his team. Bunga will be hoping and praying for the well-being of his favourite bald little man. No, I'm not talking about his newborn son, I'm talking about Gary Ablett. The entire fate of the game hinges on the performance this weekend of Gary Ablett. With the commish securing the future of two of his superstars midweek in Bryce Gibbs and Nate Fyfe, he will be confident that all good things can come in threes. For Bunga, it is said that you can rub a newborn's baby head for good luck. He's going to need triplets to rub the heads of to overcome the juggernaut of the commish this week. The swagger is back. Another win in the bank. The commish by 93 points. Now, we move on to Ben versus Steve. For the first time in a while, it can be said that both of these teams are coming into a match actually in winning form. Ben managed to put a huge dent in Tricky Mickey's league aspirations with a thrilling victory that came down to the very last kick of the game last week. Beating the form team in the league will give Ben's lineup huge confidence to be able to brush aside a mug like Steve. He'll have to do so without his gun midfielder Daniel Cross, however, who, like his coach, has managed to break his leg, which puts him out for about 6 weeks. Recent trade talks have all been surrounding a possible move involving Sandilands and Stevie J. As no one is actually prepared to trust Ben at the trade table still, these two will remain put for one more week. Steve is coming into this match from a slightly lower base. If beating Robbo is considered beating the buy, then beating Bunga is surely only the equivalent of beating the Port Adelaide under-9s. In Steve's current situation, he's happy to take any win he can get though. One thing worth noting about Steve's position, he has a far better chance of finishing last than he is of moving up that one single spot on the ladder. There's a 3-gap jump up into 6th position this year, and there's only a few games to the bottom of the ladder. With his current team, and with McAvoy set to miss another week, I can't see Steve beating Ben. Ben by 23 points. Now we move on to Tom versus Robbo. While a few weeks ago this may have been considered a week off for Tom, all of a sudden his team is a shambles. It's almost as if his missus stole his password and crashed his team into a tree. This is the game Robbo really needs to steel himself for. Speaking of, his gun midfielder Steele Sidebottom is back after a 3-week suspension, and not a moment too soon to be honest. Speaking with Robbo earlier this week, he made mention of the fact that he has 4 outs of his team this week. Personally, I see that as a positive, because it's an opportunity for him to actually bring in a few better players and get rid of some of his duds. Let's be honest. 4 forced changes to a team going this badly can only be a good thing. On the other side of the ledger, a big positive for Tom's lineup is that number 1 ruckman Sean Hampson's actually been left out of the team. That's almost as positive for Tom's team as it is for Richmond. This is a super important game for Tom if he has any dreams of winning the league, and let's be honest, this is probably the best chance he will ever get to get this close to winning it. A loss here, and it'll be a 3-game turnaround to overhaul Matt on the top of the ladder. I'd hate to think the season's over with so many games left to go, so I'm tipping Tom, only just though, by 13 points. Now we move on to Hayden versus Tricky. This match couldn't have come at a better time for Tricky after he's struggled to come to terms with how he's managed to lose to the bottom place team in Ben. It was probably the most important week of the season for him. Instead of being hot on the heels of Matt in top spot, he's now back in the ruck and has managed to fall back below Andy into third. Andy's into third. Yeah, Mick's into fourth. Amazingly, Hayden is still sitting in 5th position on an equal number of wins, despite the fact he has completely abandoned his team this year. Just imagine if he didn't leave his team in the lurch, trying to chase his dream of joining the Yakuza. He could have actually won the league this year if he'd tried. Never mind. With possibly the fullest lineup of the year for Tricky, I can't see him putting in 2 stinkers in a row. Look for him to bounce back and possibly go big. I'm talking over 1900 big this week. Tricky by 210 points. Andy versus Matt. After taking care of Tom in the battle for top spot, Matt will be looking to kill off the other challenger to his title when he takes on third-placed Andy in this titanic battle. Being unable to rely on anyone else to give him a chop out, Matt figures if you want a job done right, do it yourself. That's exactly what he's been doing of late as he continues to take care of his closest rivals. A win here against the only man with a percentage that could actually get him above Matt will almost put one hand on the cup and the other hand on a 2-litre Coke filling it up. In all honesty, Andy has absolutely no chance of winning this game. As much as I'd like him to win, because let's be honest, if Matt wins here, we might as well have the season finale next week, pack up the show, and I'll see you next year. It'll all be over. After going through Andy's lineup and seeing not only Troy Chaplin, but Tyrone Vickery in the same team, it's fair to say he isn't exactly set up for success this week. We will follow this one with interest. All the impartials will be on board with Andy, but I can't go past the rampaging Matt. Matt by 140 points. Now, we move on to Chris versus Callum. Who would have thought coming into this game, both of these two would be considered form sides of the competition? This week they will be fighting it out for the Richmond Tigers Cup. The loser will actually be in 9th position at the end of the round. Chris has managed to win 4 of his last 5, but last week looked like he was back to his early season best as he copped a spanking at the hands of Andy. The big end of Goddard worked with immediate results last week for Callum, as Goddard almost scored the same as the 2 players did for Matt that he traded out. It's only taken him 2 years, but he finally made a decent trade. With Watson out for the season, I can see Goddard dragging Callum up the ladder by his ridiculous eyebrows. Chris has probably had the worst pick 1 of anyone in the league this year. Not really his fault entirely. The commish half talked him into it. Once again, superstar Ryan Griffin is set for a spell on the sidelines after more back spasms resulted in him being subbed off on the weekend, and he looks like he could miss a couple of weeks. This makes it pretty tough for Chris going into this match. I think his mid-season run is coming to an end, and Callum will pile in another comfortable victory. Callum by 176 points. Now, let's move on and have a look at the ladder. It's shaping up seriously well with only 8 games to go. We have a clear leader on top now after last week's match, with Matt surging clear of poor old Tom, who has led for pretty much most of the season. I'm sure the commissioner's feeling really sympathetic about that one. He wouldn't know anything about that. The last of the challenges to Matt will likely come from either Tricky or Andy. Most likely Tricky, as he does have a slightly easier run home. Right down the bottom, we have a new leader in the race for the spoon, as Robbo has completely bottomed out And the best he can really hope for this season is to gain pick 1 in the draft next year. The commish seems to have a team capable of winning a few more games, and Ben's luck doesn't really permit him to finish last in anything, let's be honest. Now, it's time to take a moment in the show to be serious. During the week, one of our very own coaches has had his very first child. I'd like to congratulate Bunga and his wife from all of the team here at Anchor Studios and the guys in the Thunderdome. Bunga, we wish you all the best. Now, we've actually managed to get one of our photographers into the hospital to get a look at the little fella. We've got a photo here, can we bring that up? Look at it. The likeness to his dad is uncanny. In fact, you can hardly tell them apart. Alright, now, we've got a special treat for all of you Tiger fans out there. We've managed to secure one of the biggest guests ever on the show. We've had Damon, we've had Keefe. Now we've got a genuine bona fide superstar of the competition. During the week was this fellow's 23rd birthday. We sent the call out from Thursday Thoughts to the first round draft pick, and personal favourite of mine, Dusty. We went to him to see if he could give us a quick rundown of what a life in the week of Dusty entails, and he's responded. Let's check it out. G'day guys, Dusty here from the Richmond Football Club. I'm not a huge fan of doing media work and all that, but you know, when Eddie puts a call through to the club, I was a little bit shy. A little bit shit-faced at the time, so I agreed to it. It was about 7 AM on a Monday morning, but I guess I wasn't thinking straight, eh? Now, as you know, I'm Dusty from the Richmond Football Club. No, I'm not like all stupid like you guys think. I just thought it worth mentioning that I'm from Richmond again, so that you aren't surprised that I don't really have a lot of details on how I prepare for the game weekend, bruv. I'm clearly the only one who can kick and catch properly. I mean, don't get me wrong, Koch is like a brother to me, but how's he going to stiff arm someone with those little arms? I mean, he hasn't even got like super tat strength like I do and stuff. You know, like, I love a Saturday Arvo game. It's like the one we've got coming up. It fits my schedule perfectly. I can get a good solid 3 hours sleep in the night before, you know, nothing too heavy on a Friday night. Dimmer hates it when he treads in one of my wet burps in the middle of the G before the game, you know. So I have to go lighter in these days. Maybe just a couple of bumps, you know. Like, you know, a little bit of that sort of stuff, you know. Just to get the party started, you know, just so I can feel, you know. Since it's my birthday this weekend, we've got the Saints. They're fucking shit, can't say. Me and a few of the boys will head out, we'll get fully charged after the game, you know. Kingy will hook us straight up after the game. I'd love to be able to tell you what happens after that, but, you know, usually all I remember is waking up Monday morning just in time to head to training and do it all again. Now, thanks for asking me to be part of the show. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Eddie Anchor. I've especially loved the Weekly Wanker. That bung is dumb, can't eh? Big ups to my boy, the commish. Represent, bruv. Much love. Peace. Wow, thanks for that, Dusty. I think I'm mildly aroused at the presence of the great man. But it's time to move on. Speaking of moving on, it's time for the free agent of the week. I'm kind of surprised this man isn't already in someone's team, the way he's actually been going this year. Compared to some of the shitmen in the midfield of some of the teams, this bloke could be a welcome addition permanently. Matt Rosa is the Western Derby specialist, or Derby, depending on where you're from. With an unbelievable record against the Dockers, his superb form last week has him hitting the game in absolute peak condition. He's been pretty much bulletproof this year with the odd huge game. The only reason I could see this week not being one of them is if they actually finally decide to send a man to him to try and curb his influence on the outside. Matty Rosa, get on him. Now, the final segment of the show. It's time for Eddie Anker's Weekly Wanker. Here at Thursday Thoughts, we take the reporting of the news seriously. We don't like seeing pissy little paparazzi skulking around corners, taking sneaky photos out front of people's houses, reporting bullshit and just making up blatant lies. During the week, a gentleman well known for his shit talking, or as he calls it, general conversation, decided he would start rumours about a certain member of the Thunderdome and his interest in fornicating with various wildlife animals. Now, I won't name the person involved, but Callum was extremely pissed off at not only having these rumours and half-truths spread about him, but the fact that he was singled out as part of an unprovoked attack by someone further back in the evolutionary chain than he is. If anyone is going to be swapping bodily fluids with a hairy primate, it's more likely to be this week's wanker than Callum. Never has a man dragged his knuckles lower or had a more pronounced primitive brow than this person. They actually coined the term going apeshit after this gentleman had one of his infamous tantrums and threw his shit all over the place before storming off after losing a game of tug-of-war with Coco the monkey. This week's wanker, for about the 5th time this year, is Steve. You'd think he would have learnt his lesson by now, but it seems like he's trying to get his name etched into history as the wanker overlord. It just blows me away. Anyway, that's all the time we got this week. Enjoy the games, enjoy the footy, good luck with your team, see you next week.